Murphy at Murtech.com with your daily news update. Okay, here we are on August the 19th in the year of our Lord 2025. And guess what? I got a lot of great information for you. Let's go ahead and click over here, Murtech on Rumble. And right here is the video that you're watching. It says upcoming, but you're actually watching it. Let me do a... There we go. Jump into that. Close that out. And let me slide down here and expand the description box and show you that we have information here from Alex Newman, Doug in Exile, Vince Dow, and Wendy Bell. Okay, but before we get into that, I do have a couple of shout outs here. Debbiebs was kind enough to repost my video from last night, episode 1658. Also, Debbiebs, Susan080, USA Rule 1776, and Big John Perez commented on my episode 1658 from last night. So thank you very much, folks, for your comments. Thank you for reposting my video. Let me give this a thumbs up. Boom. There we go. All right. Speaking of comment of the day, let me go ahead and share Debbiebs's comment with that. All of this information was amazing. Thank you. Well, I'm glad you liked it, Debbiebs. I hope other people thought it was amazing too. Okay, Tech.com with your daily news. There we go. Here's her comment. All of this information was amazing. And this is the video that she's talking about right here, my episode 1658. Okay, jumping back here, let's move on. And Alex Newman, vaccine credibility being destroyed with Dr. Peter McCullough and John Leake. Okay, so I've got this moved up to about, he has some other information and some other guests, but this is the important one, Dr. Peter McCullough. So let's go ahead and jump up here and see what he has to say.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Folks, the vaccine promoters are coming down on those of us who ask questions with increasing viciousness. The American Academy of Pediatrics just recently proposed that we eliminate all religious exemptions, all philosophical exemptions from their mandates. In other words, if you want your child to be able to get an education, he or she must have all of the injections that the government recommends in cooperation with Big Pharma. But at the same time, we're seeing more and more pushback. Well, there's an incredible book that is now on the way. It's called Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. And it is written by one of the greatest medical doctors I know of, Dr. Peter McCullough, who basically staked his life and his reputation and everything on the line to expose some of what was going on during the COVID. Now, of course, he's been fully vindicated. Not enough apologies yet, but they should be forthcoming any moment, I'm sure. And also John Leake, an incredible individual who has lived all over the place. He's been doing a lot of work with Dr. McCullough. He's a writer. He is a thinker. He does the Substack Focal Points and is basically secretary for the McCullough Foundation. So they teamed up and wrote an incredible book. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
Absolutely. Dr. McCullough, let's start with you. I mean, you guys argue in this book that the narrative surrounding vaccines is starting to crumble. It was once untouchable, and now, people are starting to ask real questions. What do you say?
Boy, the capstone on this entire vaccine controversy was the COVID-19 vaccine campaign. And, in our book, we have these various epochs of time. And the epoch that the COVID vaccines have fallen into is called the epoch of bio warfare or bioweapons. And indeed, that's what's going on. And so, John Leake went back to essentially the very beginning. And, his research and my contributions led us to conclude that what happened with the COVID-19 vaccine was building upon prior history.
Yep. And you guys look at that history in this book in a way that I think desperately needed to be done. I stumbled across some of this in 2009 with the swine flu hysteria, but not a lot of people were talking about it. In the book, you actually talk about how a lot of the supposedly incredible achievements that came about from vaccines are actually better attributed to like better sanitation and basic things like that. John, what did you find when you did a deep dive into the history of vaccinations? I mean, how did they get to be this thing that like you can't ask questions and we have to mandate them and that everybody needs liability immunity? I mean, how did we get from original research to where we are today?
I mean, it's notable that the American Academy of Pediatrics wants to remove religious exemptions to children receiving the vaccines on the childhood schedule. When I go back and look at the whole history of this, going back to the 18th century, what I would suggest is that the American Pediatrics has itself erected a sort of religious cult around vaccination, and it doesn't want any other kind of religious sentiment, competing with its own cult. I mean, if you go back to the 18th century, and we start with the smallpox outbreak in Boston, Massachusetts in 1721, what we see is that very quickly, and speaking in the early 19th century, it wasn't vaccination, it was what was generally referred to as an inoculation procedure, in which you take a little bit of disease-causing matter from a smallpox pustule, you make an incision in a healthy person's arm, and then rub a little bit of the disease-causing matter in that wound in order to inoculate. The idea was introduce just a little bit of poison, and that will render the recipient immune from more severe illness. So that idea was quickly perceived as something like a method of protection that was almost conceived as having a mystical significance. And it's notable that the foremost advocate of this early smallpox inoculation procedure in Boston was Cotton Mather, who was first and foremost a Puritan minister and theologian. And he expressly stated in a Boston newspaper that he perceived this inoculation procedure to be a gift from God. And that kind of archetypal, what I would call sort of religious thinking, has really characterized the vaccine enterprise for all 300 years. I mean, between 1721 and 2021, we're told that it's going to protect us all. Bill Gates told us in April of 2020 that this new COVID vaccine was coming. It was almost like the advent of a vaccine. There's a sort of, you think of the Gospels that, fear not, I bring you tidings of great joy, a child is born. It was almost like Bill Gates was proclaiming the advent of this vaccine. It had not yet been developed. It had not yet gone through trials, but he felt confident in stating that when it's ready, and it shall be ready soon, when every man, woman, and child on earth receives it, then we'll be able to go back to normal. And so this kind of thinking, what we've discovered, it's not really an entirely scientific enterprise. It starts with this proposition, and then any effort to actually evaluate, is the vaccine truly safe and effective? Any attempt to evaluate that is then heavily biased. There's already been a decision that we're going to place our faith in that, and anybody that sort of raises questions, points to flaws in the concept, is quickly shouted down as a sort of heretic and dismissed. So what we propose in our book is, let's get vaccines, the vaccine enterprise, out of the realm of orthodoxy and heresy, and let's get it back into the arena of critical evaluation and discussion.
Yeah, that would be a positive development in my opinion. Dr. McCullough, going back to you now, you are, of course, a medical doctor, and we do see now more and more parents resistant to these vaccines. Everywhere you look now, record numbers of parents are opting out, record numbers of parents. I mean, the CDC funded a study that showed about half of pregnant moms now for the first time with their first baby are even considering skipping some or all the vaccines. This is really, really a new, and I would argue unprecedented development. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Dr. McCullough?
We're largely talking about healthy children being born. In that circumstance, 6 studies show that a healthy child remains healthier if they don't take any vaccines, because they obviously can't have any chances of developing vaccine complications. And the big ones we're worried about are allergic illnesses that develop or neuropsychiatric problems that develop after a big battery of vaccines. You can't have those largely if the child doesn't take the vaccines. But you're right, in a paper in JAMA recently, 40% of parents said they're going to follow the full schedule. But I believe about 60% said that they're going to delay or they have some questions. Now on a Focal Point Substack this week, we have a report from the CDC, July 31st, 2025. CDC is reporting from last year's data. We have roughly 10% of kindergartners that are coming in unvaccinated. That means no MMR, DPT, or the other big combination vaccines. So the goal of 95% vaccinated for theoretical herd immunity by the vaccine community, that's gone now. And I think we'll see further erosion as people go unvaccinated.
Fascinating times. John, turning back to you now, we just got done talking with Congressman Warren Davidson. He's got a bill that would remove the exemptions from liability for the vaccine manufacturers, and a separate bill that he's sponsored that would end the PrEP Act, and especially the parts that give immunity to the manufacturers of what they call these medical countermeasures. What do you think? I mean, the big pharmaceutical companies say, well, if we don't have that, then we might not even make these things. But Congressman Davidson says, no, you got to stand behind your products. What do you think? Is it time for Congress to undo those exemptions from liability for the manufacturers of these products?
Absolutely. And there are 2 reasons that there are many reasons, but there are 2 I would highlight. The first is, one of the things we do with our book is we go back and look at U.S. vital statistics data going all the way back to the 30s. Is very carefully compiled U.S. vital statistics data on deaths. How are Americans dying over the years? And what we discovered by looking at that data, and it's not like it requires a big crunch, it's just plainly listed in the data, is that already by the time that you get to the year 1946, so this was 2 full years before the modern mass vaccination schedule was introduced in 1948 with the DPT, combined injection for children, recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. By the time you get to 46, you've already seen a very, very precipitous drop of mortality in all of these infectious diseases, well over 95% between the turn of the 20th century and 1946. And so the first thing I would point out is that all of this propaganda about, if we stop mass vaccinating, all of the children that go to school in the United States with this schedule, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, measles, mumps, rubella, they're all going to come back, and they're all going to be these devourers of little children, and tens of thousands or up to 30,000 children a year are going to die. The historical data indicates that is flatly not true. That there were enormous advances in nutrition, sanitation, housing, food hygiene, food storage, that this general elevation of the standards of living had caused dramatic reductions of infectious disease mortality before the modern childhood schedule was introduced. As Dr. McCullough can also talk about, there are enormous advances in medicine, antibiotics, better hospital care, greater accessibility of hospital care for the poor. All of these things have resulted in a state of affairs where parents should realize if we were to back off on this fanatical hyper-vaccination of children, it's not going to immediately result in this raging dragon coming back and killing thousands of kids. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is I would quote the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor in her dissenting opinion of Brusewitz versus Wyeth, a landmark Supreme Court case in which the question of the constitutionality of the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 was examined. The court upheld this blanket liability protection for the vaccine manufacturers. Sotomayor dissented, and in her dissenting opinion, which we quote, she says, liability protection removes any incentive for the vaccine manufacturers to improve the product.
Yep.
And so for those two reasons, we argue, remove the liability protection, let them work on making their products more safe and effective.
Yeah, amen.
Okay, I'm going to pause up there. And he's absolutely right. If you don't have any concerns about it, if we screw this up, we could be in trouble. They don't give a shit. Well, let's make it cheaper so we can make a better profit. And that could be dangerous. Who cares? They can't come back on us, right? Isn't that the philosophy? All right. Well, let me click on the Rumble link here and show you that this video does come from Liberty Sentinel, which is Alex Newman's channel. I'm following his channel. I've given him a thumbs up. I hope you do the same thing for me. Okay, I got more information here. Now, this video, I'm at the 28-minute mark, and this is a 59-minute video. So, you have like 40 more minutes or 30 more minutes of great information here. The link to this video is in the description box. Just scroll down and click on it if you want to see more of it. Okay, but getting back here, we have Doug in Exile, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of my favorite people, mail-in voting blown open. Now, if you follow me anytime at all, you know I've been harping about election integrity. And we're not going to be going anywhere unless we get the fraud out of elections here in the United States. Well, I think Donald Trump is trying to do that, so let's take a listen and see what Doug in Exile has to say.
Ballots. So that's why I agree with the president.
Let me get back here to the beginning for you. Maybe. Okay, here we go.
Trump just announced his movement to end mail-in ballots. He's finally getting to this, and it does take a long time. Welcome to Doug in Exile. This is where the happy patriots are. If Trump ever straightens out or shapes up ballot problem, he'll probably avoid a civil war in America, first of all. And second of all, Democrats will never win again, which I totally support. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's always been leadership on this subject, guys. She's been our advocate for this cleaning up our ballot boxes. I'll explain a little more as we're going to hear from her. She says, I strongly support President Trump in ending mail-in voting. The elections have been stolen for decades with this practice that is ripe for fraud. Save America by saving our elections. I'll even make the case why Democrats support this too, or should support it. They do in word, they just don't realize it yet. Here's Trump. I am going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots, and also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines, which cost 10 times more than accurate and sophisticated watermark paper, which is faster and leaves no doubt at the end of the evening as to who won and who lost the election. We're now the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. All others gave it up because of the massive voter fraud encountered. By the way, I'll take you all the way back to Jimmy Carter. Has a quote on this. I won't show you the video, but he said he suspects mail-in voting because people doubt the response or the vote tallies because they suspect that shenanigans are going on. We will begin this effort, which will be strongly opposed by the Democrats because they cheat at levels never seen before, as signing an executive order to help bring honesty to the 2026 midterm elections. Remember, the states are merely an agent for the federal government in counting and tabulating the votes. So that's an interesting argument. They must do what the federal government, as represented by the President of the United States, tell them for the good of our country to do, with their horrible radical left policies like open borders, men playing women's sports, transgender woke for everyone. Elections can never be honest with mail-in votes and ballots. Now, the biggest case for this to me is this is going to avoid a civil war. If you think this is just Republicans doubting the mail-in ballots, every election that the Democrats have lost since the 80s have also gone and questioned the election results. This is a bipartisan issue, even if the Democrats won't admit it and think they're going to get an upper edge by embracing mail-in ballots. So this is just the name of peace. The next time a Republican wins, which could be 2026 for Senate and House, if they end up winning that, there's going to be massive questions about our elections, and we need to do way more policing, security from both sides on guarding the ballots, chain of custody, counts, on anything that brings suspicion to people like vote machines, which both sides, there's recordings going all the way back to 2016 to 20, Amy Klobuchar, Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin, Elizabeth Warren questioning vote machines until they win the election. Here's more from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And this is why President Trump also supports my bill, Making American Elections Great Again. H.R. 4798, it calls for a new census immediately, counting American citizens, calls for reapportionment based on the citizen-only count, and requires proof of citizenship to vote in all elections. This is also about cleaning up our vote totals. This whole episode is dedicated to votes and vote problems. Trump says he's signing an executive order that will curb fraud in elections. Here's Megyn Kelly with what they did to Tulsi Gabbard, what Hillary Clinton did to Tulsi Gabbard, just so you know, which is very anti-vote, anti-Democrat, Democrat, her own party. When they want you out of the way, Democrats will wipe you.
Absolutely loved making up lies in her campaign about the Russians interfering against anybody who she didn't like or wanted to undermine. Tulsi was just one of them. Then Tulsi, an independent thinker, quite obviously, winds up leaving the party. And then she says, you know, this war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine didn't have to happen. If we had just listened for a minute to what Putin was saying about how it was genuinely important to him that Ukraine not be that NATO not be expanded by allowing Ukraine potentially to join it, this whole thing could potentially have been avoided. And was it really so important to us that we not say that? Couldn't we have said that? Couldn't we have listened?
So this involves the Ukraine war with Tulsi Gabbard, saying that they could have, if they listened to her back then, we might have talked ourselves out of this whole war. But remember, it was Hillary Clinton that said she was a Russian asset. And remember, when she was up for the role of DNI with Trump, all of them were saying before they approved her, this is when her name went up in the fall, they were all saying, she's a Russian asset. She's a Russian asset. She's suspect. It was all made up evidence by Hillary Clinton to take her out as an opponent. Back when she was when Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat and did great on the debate stage. Here's slobbering drunk Kamala Harris on the redistricting argument. This was almost your president. We have to shore up the ballots. We have to put more eyes on them to keep this from being manipulated into office.
I think what they're doing is they're cheating. I think they're cheating.
She says we're cheating. She says we're cheating, and redistricting is cheating. Now, if the Democrats believe that we're cheating in redistricting, don't you think they would cheat at the ballot box in response as retaliation? This is why you have to lock down the vote with paper ballots and remove machines.
They want to change the current system to make it bend toward the outcome they want.
Okay, you're so sloppy and imbecilic, I can't even finish your quote. This is the dumbest politician on the planet. Look at her idiot face, that cat-like smile. We want to steal elections. We prefer ends. Democrat Party is all ends justify any means on redistricting. And by the way, I don't agree with mail-in ballots unless we make it a system where everyone has the same limitations. Because Trump voted by mail-in ballot in this last election. Don't forget. He totally advocates for it until the entire system is changed for everyone. We don't oppose mail-in ballots. I'm only saying I oppose them until it gets changed, okay? Because otherwise Republicans will never win again if we're the only ones opposing mail-in ballots. So that's why I agree with the presidential order. Here's Joe Scarborough. Remember, the Democrat Party can't win also now that they don't have a death stranglehold on media to lie to you. Here's Joe Scarborough lying to you about MSNBC being spun off of Universal. Universal doesn't want them. They're hepatitis. So they're spinning them off into their own company. And MSNBC is trying to show you how it's a win. Here's Joe Scarborough lying because he's moving his mouth.
Breaking news as it pertains to our network. This morning, a new name for the network by the end of the year. We will become MS Now, which stands for My Source for News, Opinion, and the World. And look, Andrew, they even have a graphic up. I like
MS Now. What, guys, is anyone going to watch this tripe? I don't think so. I made my own graphic for this company. Look, MS No. How about that instead of MS Now? What do you guys think of that? Let me know in the chat. MS No, or do you like the name MS Now? MS No. More.
I like it. I like it very much. Okay, I'm going to move on here. We're 8 minutes and 23 seconds into this 20-minute video. But he goes on and talks more about, election integrity. Election integrity. You would think the Democrats would be for that, would be in favor of that. But nope. Anything that is honest and straight up, they don't want that. Unbelievable. I think I told you last week when I went to the bank, when I walked into the bank, they asked me for my ID. So I guess my bank is racist. I don't know. When I went to the pharmacy to get my wife some medicine, they wanted me to show them my ID. I guess the pharmacy's racist. I don't know. But as you can see here, this does come from Doug in Exile. This is the video I shared with you. I'm subscribed to his channel. I've given him a thumbs up. I hope you do the same thing for me. All right, let's jump back here and move on and see what Vince Dow has to say about Gavin Newsom gets devastating news on redistricting as 2028 campaign faces crisis. All right. Well, Vince, what do you got to say for us?
Do us a favor.
And let me get this back to the beginning for you.
2028 hat. I'm one of his biggest supporters. These guys are not screwing around.
So it is certainly not usual. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing is not only
I wasn't exaggerating when I said that I received in the mail a Trump 2028 hat from one of his biggest supporters. These guys are not screwing around.
So it is certainly not a secret that Gavin Newsom is running for president in 2028 and is currently trying to use the California redistricting special election as the launch pad to do so. Except there's just a few problems with this strategy that we are currently seeing. First and foremost, there still remain open questions as to whether or not his current effort to gerrymander California will actually succeed. And obviously, if it does, that'll be some political boost. It'll be a piece of momentum for him. But if it doesn't, it's worth remembering here, guys, that this is not a small issue. This is something he has hitched his entire political brand on, this idea that he's going to fight back directly directly take the fight to Texas, Trump, and the Republicans on this redistricting issue. So ultimately, if he fails, that is not just a minor egg on his face. That is a total and complete disaster and humiliation. Granted, given the state of the rest of the Democratic field, he might succeed ultimately in the end in winning the nomination, but still not exactly something that inspires confidence, first of all. Secondly, however, I think it's also a relevant question as to where does Gavin Newsom actually stand with the wider American public? Because if you believe the online hype, and maybe that on TV as well, of course, over the weekend, we saw a massive surge in praise for Gavin Newsom as the future of the Democrat Party from Democrat influencers, almost all coming out at once. And I'm like, gee, I really wonder who is astroturfing that. But outside of the online bubble and outside of the political establishment Democrat consultant class, where does his popularity and favorability actually stand? Well, as we'll show you in today's video, recent polling in this regard has not actually spelled good news for Democrats, and the situation may start to get worse because, of course, he has been kind of leading thus far. You're already seeing the framework of what he wants to do, of the supposed California prosperity. We're so amazing as the pretense to why he should be the president. Now, us conservatives obviously know he is completely full of it. Many Californians also know. The question is, nationwide, how much will he be able to gaslight and hide it like a complete political sociopath, which he ultimately is? However, when you look to the current state of California, constantly hearing the Gavin Newsom bragging points about how we have the best economy, we have the biggest GDP, a lot of that is already rapidly starting to become undone, as is the case with many sanctuary cities and states at the moment who are facing massive layoffs, budgetary and financial shortfalls and the such. Because, big surprise here, I know nobody could see this coming, but after the Joe Biden stimulus money, which was giving California like a budget surplus back in 2023, and we're doing so amazing, is now beginning to dry up. Yeah, guess what? The problems with liberal policies, liberal economics, all of these things are starting to be exposed. So the situation here, guys, only getting worse. That said, in today's video, I want to break down all of these themes. First of all, where is that redistricting effort actually going? And secondly, of course, where does Gavin Newsom stand nationally? And is the situation going to get better or worse for him? We'll break all of that down. First, though, do us a favor, as usual, if you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. We're almost at 500K. Help us get there. Smash that red button. And with that said, I think, first of all, it has been basically a foregone conclusion that, hey, if Texas is going to redo its congressional maps, so can California. Except, as we've been trying to tell you for a long time, ever since the beginning of this battle, in the case of Gavin Newsom, it's not exactly that easy because he will have to go around or somehow abolish the California Independent Redistricting Commission, which, by the way, is not even all that independent. It's already massively corrupt and controlled by Democrats. Hence why California is already a state that is a silent gerrymander, is what they call it. But before we continue this video, a quick word from today's sponsor.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump past his commercial here. Pretty long commercial, actually.
We'll have to somehow abolish that. And considering it was a ballot proposition with the voters, the only solution here will be a special election, which he has, of course, called. He's planning that for this November. And again, probably a foregone conclusion. Oh, it's a blue state. They'll go along with it. Except the recent polling on this regard does not exactly agree. As you can see here, a new Politico poll conducted just over the weekend shows that California voters prefer keeping the Independent Redistricting Commission to determine the state's House seats by a nearly 2-to-1 margin here, guys. 64% support keeping the commission in place, while only 36% of respondents said they want to abolish it. This, by the way, guys, if you read the crosstabs of the poll, includes 61% of Democrat voters in the state want to keep the independent commission they already voted to establish in place. Needless to say, not very good news for Newsom. However, I would also argue that I do not think Republicans should be arrogant about this at all whatsoever, given that I'm from California. I know exactly how this works. All they need to do, first of all, is pump a few $1 million into TV ads saying, hey, vote yes on this proposition. Donald Trump opposes it, and just say Donald Trump, and you'll probably get this number to change. However, still, 64-36, that is a huge hill to climb out of in just a couple of months. The election will be in November. It is already almost September. Can you sway public opinion heavily enough in that short time period? I would also say to the Republican Party of my home state that this is the battle you need to fight. And that's a legal one with the Secretary of State. What do I mean by that? Because this is an exact story we see in California all the time. I think back, for instance, to the 2018 midterms and the ballot proposition that year to abolish California's insanely high gas tax. And you know what happened there? Was who was at the time Secretary of State in California, Alex Padilla, now infamously the senator who got manhandled by the DHS and FBI agents, rewrote the language of the proposition to, again, abolish the gas tax, to instead basically say, cut funding for infrastructure. That's what it said, right? This proposition will cut the funding for infrastructure and the roads and the highways, and the voters voted against it because they said to themselves, oh, who wants to cut infrastructure funding? Not, you read through, you could see it, but again, very manipulatively worded. We need to make sure, whether you got to take it to court or whatever, they're not allowed to do that. Make it explicit. No, we're going to abolish the Independent Redistricting Commission and allow for partisan redrawing of congressional maps. That's what it is. That's the phraseology and the language you have to put on this ballot. But nonetheless, thus far, it is looking pretty good in terms of, our battle to actually stop this from happening. Who knows? It's an open question. What will ultimately happen in November, right?
Woman on the panel.
Let me summarize. Let me summarize Gavin Newsom's speech today. Gerrymandering is evil. Please vote for my gerrymandering. Of course, he failed to mention that it's already gerrymandered. Republicans get 40% of the vote in California. They have 17% of the congressional seats under a supposed independent redistricting commission. So we're going to further gerrymander the gerrymandering.
By that standard,
42% of the state voted for Donald Trump in the last election. Now you have Governor Gavin Newsom trying to challenge that. He's not working for Californians. He is not doing what they want. He's working for the DNC because he's got to deliver the 5 seats that Governor Abbott in Texas is going to redistrict and redraw out of Texas. Now that's 5 for 5. What Gavin Newsom is very, very worried about is not the 5 seats, but the 13 to 15 seats that that Republicans will now redraw in Kansas, in Kentucky, in my state, in Florida. We're trying to get another 3 to 4 seats by doing the same game that Democrats have been doing all along. We just haven't been playing this game, but we're finally getting there. Ultimately, 2026, that's what Gavin Newsom's worried about. He's going to try to deliver what he can, what he has jurisdiction over in California, to deliver 5 seats. It's going to be the redistricting arms race is what we're calling it here. But ultimately, 2026, it's going to be a hard fight for Democrats. They're going to try, but we're going to try harder.
Yeah.
All right, let me pause it there again. That means it's even more important to make sure that these elections are not fraudulent. Okay? Excuse me. Okay, this is from Vince Dow. I've given him a thumbs up. I'm following his channel. I'm subscribed to his channel. I hope you do the same thing for me. Okay, let's jump back here. And let's see what we have from Wendy Bell. Okay, I didn't play anything from her yesterday. She had some good stuff, but I had some other stuff that was also good stuff. But she's, again, every day, she's got some good stuff again today. So let's see what she has to say.
It's magic, you know.
Welcome back to the Wendy Bell radio program. You know what? It's magic. Think about that. Think about all of the people out there, the naysayers who were telling you, you know what, there's going to be no end to this war. Trump's not going to be able to do anything. He's going to do blah, blah, blah. The only reason Zelensky's coming to the White House is so all of the European leaders can bully him to signing something that he doesn't want. Marco Rubio with Margaret Brennan over the weekend. He was like, Margaret, that's just factually incorrect. That's a lie. Knock it off. Stop sitting in your studio in New York City and trying to tell us what happened in Alaska or what happened in the White House yesterday. Tell us what happened. Because you don't know. You don't know. It's magic. No, you know what it is? It's promises made, it's promises kept. I will end the war. I will stop the fighting. And there are millions of avenues that we can take to achieve those ends. We can squeeze allies of Russia and say, you know what? You still want to do work with Russia. Russia doesn't want to work with us, maybe on this ceasefire, on this peace agreement. Well, you know what? Your tariffs are going to go up. Wait, what? That whole trade economic leverage that we got with this president, who in the Rose Garden in April was mocked for calling it Liberation Day and pulling out the charts that showed everybody's individual tariffs. That's leverage. How about this for some big huevos? Trump calling Putin during talks with Europeans, makes plan for Zelensky-Putin peace meeting. Poos predicts deal within weeks. Now, who knows if that's going to happen, but this is what we know. Donald Trump confirmed reports that he had called Russian President Putin during his meeting with European leaders and said that a sit down between Putin and Ukrainian President because this must be said your Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. We didn't invite them to come bully Zelensky. We invited them because this must be a whole of Europe approach. Zelensky needs guarantees that Ukraine will no longer be invaded ever again. And we need that show of force. And alas, what happened? Yes, Mr. President, said Putin. Yes, we shall meet a trilateral agreement, some trilateral meeting, Ukraine, United States, and Russia. During a full day of crunch peace talks with leaders from the UK, the European Union, NATO, and Ukraine, President Trump broke off to personally call Moscow, arrange a bilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky, and ultimately he set up a trilat three-way meeting in which he will act as mediator for a final peace agreement. You're going to hear what happened in this meeting, and it's not this ego blowhard Trump who wants everybody to pat him on the back, who wants to insert himself for the photo op, who thinks he's all that in a bag of donuts. He's keenly aware of the fact that he is the linchpin of world peace. And this would be the seventh deal in just 7 months. And it would no doubt be the biggest. Don't invite me, he said. If you guys can do this, please do. If you need help or you want me there, I'll be there. What does Zelensky say? I would really like that, Mr. President. To which point Trump replies, then I will be there. Where's Joe Biden? Where was Joe Biden for those 4 years, ladies and gentlemen? I didn't see him. I didn't hear from him. I didn't see him being treated like royalty by world leaders around the globe. He was a mockery. He was a puppet. And one struggling with cognitive collapse at that. That is what the Democrats did to us. All the while sending out this woke, anti-masculine, nonsense, garbage message to our youth. Don't be masculine. Don't be strong. Don't stand up for somebody. Don't get in the way of a robbery. Don't insert yourself. You sit down. Don't you worry about it. Now, as a mom of boys, hell yes. Donald Trump campaigned on a very simple fact. That war never would have started if they had not stolen the election. Putin echoed the same sentiment. This would not have started if Trump had been in the White House. But President Trump said something important. I will end this war. Promises made. Hopefully, soon. Promises kept. How do you think the media are going to respond to that? Holy moly, right? How do you come out against peace? How do you come out against lives being spared, right? Oh, they'll find a way. When we come back on the Wendy Bell radio program.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause that there and scoot it past her commercial and play a promo of my own.
Set your clocks, mark your calendars, and buckle up for the best NFL primetime football action.
Starting September 4th on Westwood One, you can catch all the bone-crushing hits, last-second heroics, and edge-of-your-seat action that NFL Thursday, Sunday, and Monday nights have to offer.
Whether you're tailgating, driving, or chilling at home, don't miss a single snap.
Listen on the NFL app, the Westwood One Sports app, at westwoodandsports.com, or just say, Alexa, open Westwood One Sports.
If it's the NFL, it's on Westwood One.
Now, don't go anywhere, because hour number 2 on the Wendy Bell radio program, we're going to pull in those world European leaders. We're going to pull those in and hear what they had to say about the events of yesterday, that they had a front row seat. They were invited by this administration to come and be a part of. Look, this is in your hemisphere. This is in your part of the world. We don't want to be involved in everything that you guys do. But we need the death to stop. Really stop. I want you to hear Marco Rubio. Welcome back, by the way, to the Wendy Bell radio program. He's on with Jesse Waters on Fox last night, Secretary of State. And Jesse asks him basically, were you there in the room when pretty much Trump peeled off from this meeting with all the European leaders and was like, wait a minute, I got to go make a quick call. And Rubio said, indeed, I was. And this is what I do appreciate Jesse Waters letting him say exactly what needs to be said. Margaret Brennan is so desperate over at CBS to tell Marco Rubio, even though she wasn't there in Alaska, she wasn't on Air Force One, she has no earthly clue what's going on. All she has is her triggered disdain for President Trump and anything that involves making America great again, or making the world safer again. She can't get out of her own way. Here's Marco Rubio. It's a great soundbite. Listen.
Were you in the room when the president talked to Vladimir Putin?
I was. And in that conversation, what came from it is that, the president suggested that Zelensky and Putin meet. So we're working on that now to try to set that up for them to meet somewhere, which again would be unprecedented. And then if that goes well, hopefully the next meeting will be a meeting between Presidents Putin, Trump, and Zelensky, where we hope to finalize a deal. We're not there yet, but that's what we're aiming towards. And that's one of the things that was discussed today, is how to get to that point. But just the fact that Putin is saying, sure, I'll meet with Zelensky, that's a big deal. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to leave that room best friends. I'm not saying they're going to leave that room with a peace deal. But I think the fact that people are now talking to each other. This wasn't happening for 3.5 years. This was a stalemated war of death and destruction. And let me tell you something. This president hates war, and he hates it. He thinks it's a waste of money and a waste of lives. And he has made it a priority, President Trump has, to bring about peace. If he sees an opportunity to step in and broker a peace, he wants to do it. He's been successful already 6 times in 6 months in achieving that. And he wants to achieve it with Ukraine and Russia as well.
And so this is what Trump puts out yesterday on Truth Social. And again, this is the carving out of the garbage middleman. This is him carving out the media, who are indeed invited to see a lot of this, right? But he goes right past them and he goes directly to his people. You want to shut me off of Twitter? You want to kick me off after January 6th? Fine. I'll create my own social media platform. In 1 week, it will eclipse anything that Twitter can accomplish. And boom, what happens? There's Truth Social, headed by Devin Nunes, and providing a conduit by which Trump directly tells you what happened. You don't need anybody to interpret. You don't need Margaret Brennan doing like smokescreen things on the side. You need to know what happened. And this is exactly what Trump said happened moments after he got off the phone with the Russian president. Here's what it says. I had a very good meeting with distinguished guests, President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, President Emmanuel Macron of France, President Alexander Stubb of Finland, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy, Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK, Chancellor of the Federal Reserve of Germany, Friedrich Merz, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte. In the White House, which ended in a further meeting in the Oval Office. During the meeting, we discussed security guarantees for Ukraine, which guarantees would be provided by the various European countries with a coordination with the United States of America. Everyone is very happy about the possibility of peace for Russia and Ukraine. At the conclusion of the meetings, I called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. After that meeting takes place, we will have a trilat, which would be the two presidents plus myself. Again, this was a very good early step for a war that has been going on for almost 4 years. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are coordinating with Russia and Ukraine. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, two things to be said about that. One, thank you for your attention to this matter. Gavin Newsom is thinking it's campy and funny to politically parrot the style of President Trump on his own social media accounts, rather than fighting for the people of California, rather than fighting inflation, rather than fighting the surge of migrants there, rather than fighting the homelessness and the crime and the outrageous taxes and the rules and regulations, rather than fighting for farmers to open up the freaking spigots of water, rather than fighting for the people in the Palisades who lost everything they had to a crematorium-style inferno. Gavin Newsom thinks it's funny to end his tweets now with thank you for your attention to this matter. Gavin, you're a beta. Sit down. And then there's the media saying, oh, it's going to be boots on the ground. John Bolton, oh, I bet everybody's going to love this when American troops go over to you. You know what President Trump just said? Security guarantees managed by the European countries who happen to be shockingly sitting around my table right now because why? Oh, that's right. I invited them. And we will act as the protective blanket on everything. Are we all understood here? I don't see much room for confusion. Well, let's talk about this. NATO Secretary General, and I love this audio soundbite, Mark Rutte, dismantling the Democrats' talking point that Trump is a Putin puppet. He says, you know what? This was a wildly successful day. What an honor. Listen.
Let me first say that this was a very successful day. And I agree with you that President Trump is a pragmatic peacemaker, as you, I think, said. And what he did this year, breaking the deadlock, starting the conversation with Putin, but also putting pressure. We have had the NATO summit, the 5%, which was a big foreign policy success of President Trump. And then he decided to, again, have lethal weapons go into Ukraine, paid for by the Europeans. And he put secondary sanctions, tariffs on India. So he's putting pressure, but he is also looking for ways to solve this, to bring this war to an end. So today was very successful. We discussed the security guarantees. We will work on those over the coming days and then have another meeting virtually with this group of leaders and the president. And then we will work towards this trilateral. And he was able, in a conversation with President Putin, to have Putin to agree to first a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. So they will now discuss where that meeting will take place in the run-up to the trilateral. So all in all, a very successful day.
Joe Biden would not have picked up that phone for Vladimir Putin. Joe Biden was not available. He did not care. Breitbart.com headline poll, Trump approval surges to 54% after meeting with Putin. Now, hearing what you're going to hear on this program, vis-a-vis what you might get on the mainstream news, sit back and ask yourself, does this sound like Donald Trump a dictator? Of course not. Does this sound like Donald Trump the big ego maniac who's all about Donald Trump? It's all about fat cats and billionaires. No, all of that blows up in the faces of those who speak the lies. Polling shows it. It doesn't take a genius to realize that the world likes peace. President Donald Trump's voter approval rating surged to 54% following his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska Friday. Can you imagine how it is even higher now if they were to take the poll today after this summit with Zelensky and the European leaders? An Insider Advantage survey conducted over the weekend found that Trump, quote, now has an advantage among every age group other than, who do you guys think? Yeah, the most senior of voters, because those are the people out in Washington, D.C. cleaning up or protesting the cleanup of crime. They're like singing stupid songs. Get out of D.C., right? Get out of my town. And you're like, hey, you know what? We're trying to make the streets safer. We're trying to make things better for all people. And all of you old white liberal schmucks who used to be big protesters of war when it was Vietnam, somehow all of a sudden are all about it. It's just crazy. Over half of independents are approving of Trump, while the vast majority of Republicans, 92%, and 17.9% of Democrats approve of the job he's doing. He improved his number among Black Americans. He's now 23.7% approval. And Hispanic voters, 47.2%. White voters are at a near record high approval with 64%. That's probably just your privilege coming through, right? The poll found that 44% of voters disapprove of Trump, giving him a net plus 10% approval rating. Donald Trump now has an advantage among every age group other than the most senior of voters. Isn't that interesting? Only the nation's oldest viewers disapprove of the job he is doing. Why ever would that be? It's so odd. And I have the breakdown here right now. InsiderAdvantage.com. Approve 54%. Disapprove 43.6%. No opinion or undecided. It's almost infinitesimal. Everybody has an opinion on Donald Trump. 2.4% no opinion. Men, 61.8% approve. Women, 47.4% approve. White people, 64.4% approve of them. Black people, 23.7%. That's a big number. Hispanics, 47.2%. 18 to 39-year-olds, 57% approve of the job Donald Trump is doing. If you're between the ages of 40 and 64, 56.5%. 65 and older, only 40% approve. But you know what's interesting? The smallest number who have no opinion or are undecided in this approval, what is your opinion of President Trump's job performance? 0.3%. an a tiny scintilla of a figure between the ages of 18 and 39, 0.3% of those polled don't have an opinion. The world is awakened. There's no going back to sleep. There's no unseeing what we've seen or putting that genie back in the bottle. Never, ever forget what these people have done to us. When we come back on the Wendy Bell Radio.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause it there. And it's great news. I hope she's right. I hope those polls are right. Fantastic. Although, you know, it really doesn't matter what Donald Trump's approval rating is. He's not going to run for re-election. What really matters is the approval rating of J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or someone else that's going to carry the torch after 2028. Okay? When you sit back and take a look at it, who gives a crap about what percentage approval Donald Trump has? Because he's not going to run for re-election. I mean, it's good that people do like what he's doing. I mean, that would definitely help out Rubio or J.D. Vance. I don't know. We can only hope that one of those two or somebody else will be carrying the torch that Donald Trump has lit for this Republican Party. Let me click on the Rumble link here and show you that this video does come
64 point IQ, this company.
And I'm following her channel. I've given her a thumbs up. I hope you do the same thing for me. All right, let's get back here. Close out the chat again. Well, let's open it back up because I want to copy this. Something Foxy Grandma gave me a hi. So I'm going to put it down here in a comment. There we go. All right. And let me do a quick refresh on this. Okay. There we go. And it looks like I've had, 129 people watch this video. I've got 61 people watching right now. I've got 5 thumbs up. Okay, so if I could get 59 of you to, 56 of you to slide down here and just scroll down and click that thumbs up button, that would be fantastic. Okay, these videos that I shared with you are videos that come directly from the producer. The link to the videos and the link to the producer's channel is right here in the description box. I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. Actually, I'm promoting their information. I don't get any commissions or royalties for doing that. I do it because I think it's important to share this news out, to share the truth out. So more and more people will be becoming aware of what's actually going on, so that we don't have to rely on the lying legacy media. If you want news and information, right here, folks, this is where you can get it. All right, let me jump over here to Murtech.com. And these 4 videos that I shared with you are videos that I posted on Murtech.com, where I have over 55 no-nonsense, common sense, logic, and truth videos. Right here's the video from Alex Newman. Right down here's the video from Doug in Exile. Down here is the video from Wendy Bell. Okay, and also the video over here from Vince Dow. But unfortunately, I don't have time to share all this information. It's great information. I go through it. It takes me a while to figure out, although Wendy Bell generally pops to the top of the list. But it takes me a while to figure out, okay, who am I going to share today? Dory DeVarkins has great information. ACLJ Seculo has a great information. So does Andrew Clavin, Barry Cunningham, Benny Johnson. Okay, but I do have, coming up here about 9:30, my daily news wrap-up, where I have right now currently 90 videos in my playlist of information that's dropped all day long from a variety of producers that's going to give you no nonsense, common sense, logic, and truth. what you're not going to get from the mainstream media. So go ahead and take a break. Grab a cup of coffee, donut, sandwich, soft drink, or a beer. Meet me back here about 9:30, and we'll get the daily news wrap-up started for you, so you can catch up on all the information that dropped today. But in the meantime, I do want to thank you for your time. Hopefully, I will get to see you again later, and may God bless.